Hello, welcome to Model Aviation Live. I'm Jay Smith, the executive editor of Model Aviation and Park Pilot magazines, and I'm happy to share some interesting information with you today about Model Aviation and Park Pilot. And we have a special guest too that we'll be bringing on shortly, Joe Vermillion. So firstly, I want to again thank everyone for their understanding 2 weeks ago. We were going to have a show 2 weeks ago, and my dog unfortunately had a medical emergency, which required a trip to the vet. So I did get some messages on Facebook, and some people reached out to me and inquired on how my dog Blossom's doing. She's a Basset Hound Lab, so they call her a Bassador. And so I just really quickly wanted to tell you thank you. And I took her to the vet today, and she's doing much better. And by probably the end of next week, she should be back to her normal self. So thank you to everybody for your understanding of us having to postpone the show for 2 weeks. And I appreciate everyone's that reached out and well wishes about Blossom. So I also want to talk to you a little bit about, now I know this is a show about Model Aviation, and we'll get there, but I want to talk really quick about Star Wars to a degree. So I'm sure, as many of you heard, unfortunately, that David Prowse, who played Darth Vader, passed away this past weekend. And obviously, myself being someone who grew up with Star Wars, anytime the Star Wars actors or actresses passed away, like last year we lost Peter Mayhew, who played Chewbacca. It kind of brings me back to my youth. And as I thought about it this week, I wanted to share with you a story that you may or may not be familiar with. So the AMA Museum was actually put together, and a lot of the design ideas came from a gentleman named Michael Fulmer. And Michael Fulmer actually worked on 2 of the Star Wars films. He worked on The Empire Strikes Back, and he worked on Return of the Jedi. He also worked on the Indiana Jones films, and he even was a stunt double in one scene for Harrison Ford. He also worked on Star Trek: The Search for Spock. I mean, just countless films. So we call him Mike, but Michael Fulmer, or Mike, he was actually one of our first museum curators, and was the museum curator when AMA moved to Muncie, Indiana. And it was his idea to put the hobby shop that you're seeing on the screen now. It was his idea to put the hobby shop as part of our museum. So some of the people like Liz Helms and Joyce Hager, who have been at AMA for quite a long time, actually worked with Mike back when he helped us. And I think he worked with us for about 2 or 3 years when AMA initially moved to Muncie, Indiana. So unfortunately, Mike passed away. I believe it was in 2016. And my understanding was he came out for a visit either late 2015, early 2016 was the last time he visited our museum. And he was very proud of his involvement with the museum. And he actually, on his website, which we're showing here, you can visit his website. It's just his name, Michael.Fulmer, or is it Michael Fulmer or Michael.Fulmer? Let me just double check for you. I guess it's just, okay, MichaelFulmer.net, as Matt just put it on the screen for us. Definitely check out his website. He has, as you just saw, he has some photos of the museum, the early days of the museum. He actually has some conceptual drawings of the museum, but he also shows pictures of his work on all these Lucasfilm projects and other projects. And so I just thought it might be interesting, as a lot of people probably thought about Star Wars this week, that I thought it'd be interesting to point out that to you, because probably a lot of people aren't aware of that. And beyond that, we also have some models that Mike built. So if we'll put a picture on the screen here in a moment. So one of Mike's models, a Fokker D7, was actually on the cover of an October issue of Model Aviation. And that D7 you're seeing now was built by Michael Fulmer, and it's on display at the National Model Aviation Museum. But I think there's about 6 models total that Michael Fulmer built. And his models just aren't, as you would imagine, just at AMA. I was actually out at the San Diego Air and Space Museum a few years ago, and it turned out that one of his models was in their museum. And they also had a trophy that had to do with the Nats years ago, and they gave that to us on loan. Just it came out of a visit I made there and some connections I made. So I just thought it'd be interesting to share that story for people who didn't know the connection, I guess, if you will, to Star Wars and Lucasfilm and Indiana Jones and whatnot. So definitely, if you visit the museum, in the scale section, you'll see that Fokker D7 that we used on the cover. And as I said, there's other models in the museum that were built by Michael Fulmer. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about is I'm in my home office, as I am when we do this show, but I wanted to share with you that the majority of AMA is currently working from home on a regular basis. Obviously, given the situation with COVID-19, you're probably aware that for about 3.5 months, the entire staff worked from home. And then we came back to the office. And, given the current situation, the majority of staff who are able to work from home currently are. So I just wanted to share that, for your knowledge. So we're still available to you by phone, by email. If you email me, I can get your email on my laptop. I can get your email on my desktop, which is right here next to me. I can get your email on my cell phone. If you call me, my work phone actually rings to my laptop, and I talk to you through my laptop. Or if I were to call you, it would look as though I was calling from AMA, but I'm actually contacting you through my laptop. So I wanted to just point out that all of the magazine staff and many of the AMA staff are working from home right now, but it doesn't mean that you can't get in touch with us or we're not working for you. We are indeed, and in fact, available to you, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and you can reach out to us like you always have. We also are periodically going into the office to get our mail. So if you were to send us something in the mail, we'll get that as well. But I just wanted to kind of share that information with you, just so you're aware. And we'll definitely, continue to work from home for now until things improve with the current situation. I also want to talk to you a little bit about Park Pilot and surface content in Park Pilot. So you probably are aware that we actually put a Jeep on the cover of Park Pilot, and I actually did the review on it, and it was a rock climber slash trail truck. And there's a picture right there of the issue. So I wanted to share with Park Pilot readers that surface vehicles are now covered under the Park Pilot insurance. So cars and boats are covered. So rather than just put it in my editorial or just put it somewhere in the magazine, I figured if I put it on the cover, everyone would see that. But I was curious, what impact that might have if aero modelers would have any concerns or issues about a car being on the cover of an airplane magazine. And I'm happy to tell you that I actually received several compliments about it, that people were excited to see that. I mean, obviously, if you fly model airplanes, it is possible that you dabble in cars or boats. I mean, myself included. I have RC cars, I have boats. I've been flying and doing cars and doing boats and doing rockets and all that for pretty much my entire life. So we actually got a lot of positive feedback, and I even got a phone call from a Navy fighter pilot who has 2 children, and they're a little bit young yet for him to teach them how to fly. So right now they dabble with RC vehicles, and the father is looking forward to sharing the joy of model aviation with them soon. And his son was super excited to see the Jeep on the cover because their mother drives a Jeep. I don't think it's orange, but a similar Jeep, and they were very excited about it. And the gentleman who is the Navy fighter pilot reached out and said he enjoyed that, and a lot of other people said they enjoyed that. So my hope is that we can include a little bit of surface content in Park Pilot. Now, we're not going to take away any of the aviation content. We're not going to sacrifice aviation content to give you surface content. I want to make that clear. It's going to be in addition to. So on that level, John Barnes just completed a review of a Kyosho vehicle, and he did a really neat video for us showing an airplane and then transitioning into the vehicle. So that's a really neat video to check out. He used a drone to get some video. He used, I think, a GoPro. I mean, he used several cameras to try to make the vehicle look as realistic as possible. So that's something you'll definitely want to check out, in the review of that vehicle will be in the next issue of Park Pilot. And then myself, I just received this week a 1/8 scale vehicle from Horizon Hobby. It's under the Arma brand name, and it's called the Notorious. And it basically has the look of I would say like a 1950s pickup truck. And so I'm really excited to dabble with that. I actually have a park right next door to my house, like 100 yards from where I'm speaking to you, is a full park with ball diamonds and hills. And so I'm really looking forward to trying out the truck and doing a complete review of that. So just kind of wanted to touch base on that and let you know what our plans are going forward in Park Pilot, but that the focus still obviously is on Model Aviation, and all that content will still be there. But where possible, there might be a little bit of cars or boats content also made available to you. As far as Model Aviation, when we did our redesign a couple of years ago, we went to a matte finish cover. We got a lot of good feedback on that, but I also did get some feedback that some people said if they chose to peel their label off, it sometimes would leave some type of residue on that matte finish cover. So we've made a decision now after 2 years to go back to a glossy cover, just like we had prior to the redesign. So starting with our January issue, the cover will again have a glossy finish. So it should help with people who choose to peel their labels off. And let me know what you think when the cover comes out in January or going forward. Let me know your thoughts of what you think about a glossy cover as compared to the matte cover that we had for 2 years. Also, in talking about Model Aviation, several years ago, probably in the neighborhood of about 11 to 12 years ago, I was asked to do an article about Dubrow, and because they were celebrating 50 years in business. And I came up with the idea of doing an About Us article. And I came up with the name About Us because that's typically the name that you would click on if you went to a website to learn more about that company. So basically my idea was around the About Us was to not only tell the story of a company in our industry, but tell stories of other companies as well. And beyond that, I also wanted it to be a chance for us to give you for free, for someone to win a product or products, maybe more than one, from the company that we highlighted. So it started with Dubrow, and over the last 11 to 12 years, we have done articles on many companies and given away many prizes. And we hadn't had any articles probably in about a year. And I wanted to tell you that I want to bring that back and share more stories about companies in our industry and allow you, the reader, to win free products. So the first company that we are going to have an upcoming About Us on is Andy Clancy Designs. And so you're probably familiar with the Clancy Lazy Bee. I mean, that design, I remember in the early years of going to CEF, you'd see it quite often. You'd see it at a lot of events. Well, if you've looked in the magazine in the last few months, there's an ad in there by Andy Clancy Designs, and Andy is back with the different variations of the Lazy Bee. He is selling kits. So my next About Us is going to be a discussion with Andy and about his background in aero modeling and how the Lazy Bee and the other model aircraft happened. And we'll also be giving away at least a kit, possibly more. That's something that I hope to do next week, is to have the discussion with Andy and learn all the history so I can write about it and share that with you. So I'm excited to bring back the About Us because there's a lot more stories to tell in our industry and a lot of neat prizes to give away that you can win. So, I mean, obviously, who doesn't like to win a free airplane or a free kit or a free radio? So I hope to do several About Us articles in 2021 and be able to give away more products. And talking about products, I also want to mention real quick, kind of a sneak peek. In the January issue of Model Aviation, I did a review of an airplane called the Bighorn by Ohio Model Products. And this aircraft is basically, it comes out of the box with a high level of completion. It has the servos are already in it, the motor's already in it, the speed control's already in it. I think we have a picture that we're going to be able to put on the screen for you of how it comes out of the box. But basically, this airplane takes very little effort to put together, but it's a ARF in essence. It's a balsa covered aircraft. It's not foam, but it has, like I said, the servos are in it, the speed controls in it, the motors in it. It's at a high level of completion. The cowl's mounted. So if you're interested in a balsa model, or maybe your experience thus far has been in foam models like bind and fly and receiver ready type foam models, and you want to take the next step to try flying a balsa aircraft, this would be a good option. It also comes with or without flaps. So you can purchase the model with flaps or without, and it's actually, there's a different price point for each, because obviously with the flaps, that requires 2 more servos than without. So it's actually less expensive if you choose that you don't want the flaps. In my case, I reviewed the flap version, and as I said, that will be in the January issue, so you can read a full review. I actually did a review on the green version, because green's actually my favorite color, and there's often not a lot of model airplanes. There you go. You see it there. That's the version that I reviewed. But I just wanted to give you a kind of a sneak peek that that's going to be in the January issue. And it was neat to see a balsa covered model that also has a high level of completion, if that's something that interests you. So you can look for the full review on that. And the other thing I wanted to share with you is that we had done a radio review by Graupner, and right about the time the review came out, we unfortunately got the news that Graupner USA was closing. And so obviously a lot of people got the news just after our review ran and started to ask, well, where do we get receivers if we have Graupner radios, or how do we get parts? So I'm happy to tell you that Graupner is back, and Manny Garmy is running it, just like he ran Graupner USA, although the name now is Control Hobbies. And that's a name that Manny has used in the past. So Control Hobbies is now distributing Graupner products in the US. So I wanted to let you all know that as well, so that if you do have Graupner radios or interested in Graupner products, those are now available back in the US. So today, our special guest is Joe Vermillion, and I'm excited to bring him on the show and talk to him. As you probably know, he helped out and worked with SIG Manufacturing in the past, and he currently works with Balsa USA. He flies and builds World War I airplanes as well as others, and he's done some articles for us for Model Aviation on how to make your own build table and such things as that. And we even actually featured him, the I Am the AMA on the back page. He was featured in the December 2019 edition of I Am the AMA. So I would like to welcome Joe Vermillion to our show.
How we doing, Jay?
Hi, Joe. How are you?
Good, buddy.
So I promised everyone that the first thing I was going to find out when we brought you on the show is why your nickname is Mean Joe.
Well, that's actually a story some might have heard before. What happened was I was actually at the time, as you mentioned, I was working with R&D at SIG, and we were in the Toledo bar having our business meeting after the show one night. And as everybody knows, when Toledo was up and running full swing, that bar is very small. And as the day wore on, it would get fuller and fuller and fuller of people. Well, good friends of mine, Jim Graham and Matt Gunn from RC Groups, were standing over by the bar. And I've been in the military, I've been in the factory for a long time, but my hearing's not the best. And they were trying to get my attention, and they were over across the room yelling at me. And my buddy elbows me, and he said, "Those guys are screaming at you." And I looked up, and Matt Gunn said, "Hey, look, it's me, Joe." And that was all it took. It flicked it against the wall, and it stuck. So from that day forward.
Well, it's interesting because, as I had mentioned on AMA Air, you're anything but mean, and you've come out and helped us with National Model Aviation Day and several events at AMA, and I previously, I mean, unfortunately not anymore, but previously would hang out with you at Toledo and things like that, and I've hung out with you at the Dawn Patrol event at the Dayton Air Force Museum, and so definitely mean would not be a word I would use to describe you, Joe. So
well, it's always just under the surface. I always tell people it's just under the surface, just to keep them on their toes.
All right, fair enough. So as I mentioned, we did interview you for I Am the AMA in the December issue, and you had mentioned that a friend got you into aero modeling. So tell us a little bit, for people that might not have read that, tell us a little bit about how you got introduced to our hobby.
Actually, a good friend of mine from work, Daryl Peck, was a member of CARDS, which, funnily enough, I just saw the article is going to be on next Tuesday for the grant that they just received, and the president and the vice president are going to be on that show, which I thought was really cool. That's my home club. We were at the factory working. For those of you that don't know, I still own a 40-hour-a-week job with General Motors, so I do that plus what we do here with the model aviation stuff. And he comes out and he says, "Hey," he says, "you should come out to the field. We fly model airplanes." And I said, "You do not. I have always wanted to do that." And he talked me into going out, and 3 weeks later I had 5 airplanes, and it's all downhill from there. So I blame him for all of this stuff. So
Is he still a pilot and a flyer?
oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Me and him both actually are student trainers out at the club field. And he's right now, I believe he's getting ready to go down to Florida for a few months. He's been able to retire and go down there and enjoy the warm weather. But yeah, we get a chance to hang out quite a bit. I don't nowadays, as busy as we are with this stuff, I don't get a chance to see him as much as I'd like to. But I owe all of this to him.
So Joe, how long ago was that?
Gosh, my first full year as a member of the AMA was 2011.
Oh, okay.
So.
And what was your first airplane? I mean, I know you said you had a bunch right off the bat, but what did you start with?
Well, to be completely upfront and honest, I got out there and I got all excited and I made the mistake that we all make. I went out to the hobby shop and I bought remember the little micro Beast?
Yes, the biplane.
One that come with the receiver.
Yeah.
I grabbed it up. Oh, this will be awesome. And I took it out to the field and I was all proud of this airplane. I pulled up in the car and opened the back of the truck, and Daryl goes, "Yeah, that's a good airplane, but that's not where we're going to start."
Yeah.
So I ended up getting a trainer. I think it was an old Alpha 40, if I'm not mistaken, one of the old first original ones, and banged it around. And then we ended up having some issues with a wing and replaced it with a newer version. And I flew that literally for a year before I ever even started trying to fly anything else. So,
it's interesting that you mentioned the Beast, because when the larger version of that aircraft, the RC version, came out, I was at Joe Knoll the year that it was unveiled, and we didn't know it, but the full scale flew in to Joe Knoll, and it was a surprise. So Kike flew the RC version, and then at the end of his flight, the full scale flies by, and then it lands. And then they get pictures with Kike and, the pilot of the full scale aircraft. So what a really neat experience that was to be there and experience that. And
yeah, very cool.
Yeah. And I know you've been to several Joe Knolls at this point, right?
Oh, yes, sir. Yeah. We go every year.
It's an incredible event.
Oh, it is. It really is. I'm actually a little worried about this year because of the COVID shutdowns and all that stuff. I think it's going to be completely ridiculously packed, which is a good thing. But I just think it's going to be probably the biggest one they've had. Just me guessing.
And they've had some really big ones thus far. So
yeah, I think you're going to break a lot of records this year.
So what was your first quote unquote big event?
Well, my first big event would have been Joe Knoll. I actually, early on, I had been communicating with Jim Wigner when he was still with Precision Aerobatics. And the first team that I ever flew for that went to events, I started out actually flying for West Michigan Park Flyers here in Michigan. And then I got picked up by Precision Aerobatics and flew with Precision Aerobatics for probably about 3 years. And but my first event was parked on the electric line. Still hadn't had a trailer yet, and I was parking there in my 2005 Pontiac Aztec, right on the electric flight line way back when. So that would have been my first, I would say, big event.
When the first time you went to Joe Knoll, was that when they were flying the electric line up in the front, or was it when it was more down close to the 3D line?
It was down closer to the 3D line, and actually. Flight test guys that season, I can't even remember what year it is now. I want to say it was the 2017. That was their first Joe Knoll.
Oh,
and Josh and those guys parked directly across the road from me. They were on the backside of the berm where the pond is, the lake is, and we got the chance to hang out all that week and we had a blast. So yeah, it was a good first Joe Knoll trip for all of us.
Absolutely. So where did your interest in World War I come from, and when did that start?
I've always interested in everything aviation. I think that is attributed to my father. Back in the day, when I was little, he had a buddy, Bruce, that did, back in the day, what would have been considered giant scale RCs. And they, of course, back then it was all built. They didn't know what ARFs were. They do the converted chainsaw motors and all that stuff. And when we'd go over there, Bruce would let me glue a piece here and there. And we get a phone call from Bruce one day. He says, "Hey, grab Joe, come out to the field. We're going to go made in this P-51 that he's been putting pieces on." And we got all excited and we drove out there. And this would have been my forte into model aviation, except for the fact that they took that plane off. And back, of course, in the old 72 megahertz days, immediately lost it and flew it right directly into the biggest, giganticest oak tree you've ever seen in your life and blew it up into 100 million pieces. And Dad said, "Well, we're not doing that." So,
Right.
but we used to go to the, remember the old Ghost Squadron Air Force shows back in the day? We'd go to those every year. We went to the big one in Dayton every single year. And I think that's how my love of aviation got started. And I've always been that kid that, looks up in the sky when he sees an airplane. Still to this day, I do that. And I think that's just built from there. I wish I would have gotten started in it, earlier.
Well, before you started in model aircraft, did you dabble at all in cars or RC cars, boats, rockets, any of that?
Yeah, I did. I raced RC-10s back when they were the original gold body, the metal aluminum ones way
Yeah,
back in the day.
me
We had
too.
a track in Elwood, Indiana, because I actually grew up in Chesterfield, which is right down the road from the AMA headquarters there. And there was a track in Elwood across from where the old Elks used to be, and it was all indoor. And we used to go and race RC-10s there all the time. So,
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I raced RC-10s as well when they first came out, and we raced at the Sunshine Speedway. It was a full scale racetrack, and we raced them there. And it's also interesting you mentioned Elwood, Indiana, because that's where David Letterman got his start. He worked
yeah.
for a radio station there. That was his first job.
Yeah, my sister actually lives in Elwood still to this day, and my mom still lives in Chesterfield. So
Oh,
that's my stomping grounds.
yeah. So for those that don't know, Elwood is about 45 minutes from where AMA is located. So I've driven through there because my son went to Purdue University. So I would, change up my route when I would go and visit. So
Yeah.
I drove through Elwood several times. So with Balsa USA, had you had much experience with World War I before you started working with them?
I had a couple of models here and there. I hadn't really had I wouldn't say a big draw to it.
Right.
I'd spoken with Mark several times. Of course, we do our big Warbird event there in Grand Ledge at the Cards Field. And I had an opportunity to speak with Mark and those guys on several occasions. And I'd flown a couple of the airplanes and whatnot. And I'd actually made the decision to move on from SIG. And literally within 5 minutes of me posting that on my Facebook saying, just to dispel any rumors, I'm moving on. This is of my choice. We're doing this communicably. They called and said, "Hey, you're coming to work for Balsa USA." And then that was all she wrote. So from that point on, it's been a huge whirlwind. So, I mean, we're just going 100 miles an hour over there.
Well, I mentioned World War I because I think that's what everybody generally thinks about with Balsa USA, but you have a lot more than just World War I. I mean, you have a great trainer and you have other aircraft, but I would say you're most known, obviously, for World War I, and that's the largest part of your catalog.
Right, and World War I's definitely our wheelhouse for sure. We have quite a few sport models. We are getting into a few more here in the near future. You're going to see a couple of non-World War I models coming out. We've got some prototypes ready to go and some things moving. Slowed down a little bit because we had a little bit about where we couldn't have people in the shop and whatnot, but we're back running full speed ahead now, and there's a lot of new stuff coming. One of my favorite sport models that we have is the Smoothie XL. That is a fantastic flying airplane. I fly it constantly. And then we've got, like you said, we've got the Balsa Trainer. We've also got the Stick 40, which is a good start. Either one of those two makes a good start into building. And I'm happy to see people building. We've noticed over the last few years, each year we get a little bit higher of a customer base, and I think there's a lot more people building now than there were. So it's definitely moving forward quickly.
So Ivan asked about asking a question. So if you are watching live, please feel free to ask a question in the comments. for myself or Joe, and we'll try to answer your question. So I've actually been to Balsa USA. It was a few years ago. I came and toured Balsa USA, and I was amazed by the wall of balsa. I mean, I don't think I'd ever seen that much balsa in my lifetime. It's just so impressive. What were your thoughts the first time you visited Balsa USA, Joe?
Oh, that place is amazing. Anybody that is into model aviation and is into building, or even if you're not into building and you're in the Menominee, Michigan area, you should come by. Once the whole COVID thing gets over, we'll be able to allow people to come through the shop again. But the Wall of Balsa is pretty impressive. It's and the amount of dust, the amount of balsa dust that gets produced there on a daily basis is another thing that's people get a big kick out of. We fill up a 10-yard dumpster in about a week with dust. There you go. There's the balsa dust. There's the balsa wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. Now, that's actually, a lot of people don't really know this, but we actually, my guess is we're probably the largest balsa wood importer in the country right now. We bring in a lot of wood, and the biggest part of the shop is a sawmill. So we get the big blocks of wood we get it from Ecuador, and we get it from Papua New Guinea. And the biggest part of the shop spends their day machining the wood into usable pieces. So that would be that wall you saw in there in the pictures. That's our standard sizes. So when you go on to balsausa.com and put in an order, you order the standard sizes. That's where they're all stored. So, and that's just one wall. There's a ton around on the other side of that too. So,
when we had Mark Landerman on, and we also had Mark Freeland on, and they both talked about a little bit of a shortage in balsa, and it has something to do with the wind turbine, the blades. Could you tell everyone that's watching a little bit about that?
So we did run through some skinny patches where balsa was getting pretty hard to come by. It is slowly recovering, and it was a combination of a few things. It was a combination of the wind turbines. The wind turbines have actually, and I don't know where they're at. I'm hoping that the COVID thing kind of helped them out a little bit. They're trying to transition into carbon fiber. They're figuring out that the balsa works good, but it's not as durable, and they'd like it to be a lot more durable. So they were, last time I spoke to anybody, they were working on figuring out how to get the foam core so that this carbon fiber sheeting would stick to it. And I think they got that all worked out. So, and then on top of that, we also had a couple of bad years. Balsa wood grows really quickly. It grows literally like a weed. And the problem we're facing is that we had some years where the climate wasn't really conducive for growing trees. They had several storms blow through, they dry seasons, too wet, too dry, and now that's starting to recover. So at this particular point, our balsa supply is slowly recovering. So, it's hard for us. We get a lot of people calling in about the wood sizes. So 4-inch wood is almost impossible to find anymore. And the reason for that is because the trees aren't getting that wide. They're having to harvest the trees before it gets to that 4-inch width. And so that's part of it. But, it's right now, it's actually recovering pretty decently. We're in a position now where we're not worried really about the balsa wood supply coming in. So.
And obviously, supply and demand also affects costs. So unfortunately, if the balsa costs more, then that's going to bring the kit prices up a little bit.
Yeah, and that's one of the unfortunate things about the business that we're in. We've had to, unfortunately, do a couple of small price increases over the last couple of years, but it's really just so that we can stay in business. I know a lot of people don't really understand how that works, but if we don't raise our prices, the prices that we pay go up. We have to do something. So we try everything we can to be able to pass that on to the consumer at a decent rate. But there are some places where you need to make some adjustments so that way you can be viable business into the future. Now, I will say that our plan is, as we move forward with this and things start to recover and get better, if we receive any, lower pricing on our end, then we'll immediately turn that back around and bring it right to the customer. So that's our goal, is to, as it stabilizes, see what we can do about bringing the cost down a little bit.
So we have a question here from Greg Gimlick. He says, are any of the kits still die cut, or are they all laser cut or CNC now?
Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're in the middle of actually taking all of the die cuts and transferring everything over to laser. So they are going to be laser cut, everything. Sorry, hopefully am I still here?
Yeah,
my computer did a weird thing there for a second and I lost the screen. So, but yes, we're in transition right now from taking everything from die cut and transferring over to laser. Keep in mind, these are all having to be redrawn. So we have to take them from scratch and basically take the plans and superimpose that onto CAD and then draw the design back over in CAD so that we can send them to the laser. Most of our kits and plans are very old, and they've been copied and recopied. So it's a long drawn out process, but we do have some kits that are actually getting out there. What we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that we keep our dealers strength. So we're trying to do like a soft launch, just as the orders come in, we're replacing the kits that they ordered with the laser cuts. So as you transition, you know, there's a very good real possibility that Greg could go to the hobby shop and buy a kit that's die cut, and somebody else could come in right behind him and the next cut would be laser, because we're not really doing a hard launch on the laser because we want to make sure those products get used up as we go.
If you went onto the Balsa USA website, would it identify the planes, or maybe that's something in the future? Would it identify which kits are laser cut?
They will all be laser cut. The only two right now that we have that are called out on the website are going to be the redesigned Pup and the Smoothie XL. Those are the only two fully laser cut airplanes that we have at this point. There's a mixture of die and laser on the rest of them.
Okay. We've got another
but
question.
They will all be.
Yeah. We got another question here. It says, whatever happened to Solartex, and what is the best alternative?
Okay, so probably about 2 years ago now, Solartex sent out an email, a mass email that said, hey, by the way, we're not producing any more Solartex. Basically, have a nice day. See you. Bye. And we immediately contacted Solartex to try to get them to, supply us with enough material to get through a couple of years. They weren't interested in that. We then pursued trying to purchase the company and the machinery, but the cost would have been astronomical because, of course, we don't have anybody. That company is based in the UK, and we didn't have anybody over there to be able to run the facility. So we would have had to pick up the 100-year-old machinery that they were using and ship it across, and there was no way logistically that we were going to make it happen. So we immediately went on the hunt. We did procure the raw material, and that's kind of a funny story because we were in the shop and I told the boss, I said, you know what, these places over in the UK, they operate in districts. So they have the fabric district and it's all related. So I got on Google Earth and put the pen down and walked down the street and actually found the raw material for Solartex. So our plain text covering that we have that doesn't have the glue and the dye on it is actually Solartex material. It's the same exact stuff. So we've secured that. And then we started doing some digging and heard some stuff about Oratex. Oratex is an iron-on fabric. So there's two kinds. The product that we carry is actually the RC version, and then there's Oratex 6000, which they use on the full-scale airplanes. There's a lot of difference between the two, but the Oratex is going to be your iron-on fabric with the glue and the dye already in it. And we've got, I think it's 13 colors we have of the Oratex. And so far, we've been pretty happy with it. I normally cover my stuff with plain text because I like the way that material works a little bit better. But we haven't had any major issues at all with the Oratex. Fully paintable. Over on the Balsa USA YouTube channel, you can get on there and there's demos. I did demos on both and how you set it all up and stuff. So the Oratex is a very similar product.
Well, it's great that you were able to keep that product available. It's difficult. In my park flyer days, I was using what was it called? It was a very light solar film, and then they announced, and again in England, that came from England, and they announced that they were not making it anymore. And like you said, you get comfortable with a certain covering, the heat you need, or if it's an iron-on covering, or you just know what it takes to use that covering. So it's great that Balsa USA was able to make that happen and allow all of us modelers to still have access to that.
Yeah, we were really, really concerned when the Solartex thing happened, because we knew that a lot of our customer base really likes that iron-on version, and it took us a minute to find the Ortex. Once we located the Ortex and figured out what it was and what it was all about, then that was kind of a no-brainer for us to move into that.
So I talked before we brought you out live on the show. I talked a little bit about the About Us articles, about telling the stories of companies, and I did an About Us on Balsa USA in the past. So Mark and I had a great conversation, and learned a lot of history. And Mark, I've seen Mark at many events, down at the World War I event down in Florida that used to be at Fantasy of Flight, and Joe Nall, and like we talked about at the Air Force Museum. So, even back in the days when they used to drive around in the old RV, I've hung out with them in the old RV. And so it was great to tell the story about Balsa USA. It was great to visit Balsa USA. And interestingly enough, and I told Mark this, of every About Us that we've ever done, we got the most response on the Balsa USA one. And
well, that's good.
Yeah, and the prize was a kit of choice. The winner got to pick whatever kit from Balsa USA that they wanted. So I'm kind of curious to ask you, Joe. I mean, you've flown a lot of Balsa USA airplanes. You've built a lot of Balsa USA airplanes. You fly them at events. If someone had some building skills, obviously, and they were a decent pilot, and they wanted to dip their toe, if you will, into World War I. Is there a model or a couple of models that you might steer a prospective pilot towards?
Well, honestly, as far as building goes, they all build about the same, and I always make sure that I let people know that once you have the basic building techniques down, it's just wood. You put it together, you follow the instructions, and basically I hate to say that it builds itself, but they all build basically the same once you have that down. So as far as the way they fly, I'm going to be honest with you, they all are just a little bit different. But I haven't found one yet that has bad flight tendencies. I would say if somebody would really want to get into a fairly easy build, that would be something that's going to fly fantastic, that'd be the D7. The D7 is just a tractor. It's probably one of the best flying models that we have. It's very forgiving. The build's fairly straightforward with having the box fuselage. And there's not a lot of complicated things with that airplane. It's a great flying airplane. But then again, I fly them all. They all fly a little bit differently. Something like the Albatross, it flies more like a fighter, so it's going to be a little bit more agile. You're going to have to keep your eye on it a little bit better. But really, I mean, pick the one you like and grab it and go fly it. I mean, we say all the time, myself and Mark, we talk daily, and we tell people all the time, gas it up, flip the prop, and go fly it, because it's just that enjoyable. And at this point, I've got a lot of Balsa USA wood rolling around in my trailer. So there's a lot in there, and I fly them all the time. I mean, we get people always, it's funny because they don't realize, like this last year, I did 22 events, and at each event, probably on average, I get, if it's just a flying event, I'll normally get 20 flights per event. I mean, because I'm one of those guys that flies it, lands it, gasses it up, flies it, lands it, gasses it up, move to the next one, do the same thing. And I just keep flying them and flying them and flying them. So I get a lot of flights in.
Sure. So. Yeah. Well, and then people sometimes ask about, which size to go with. I mean, obviously you have 1/6 scale, you have quarter scale, you have third scale. I mean, if you ask, generally speaking, if you ask somebody in the hobby, the answer is bigger flies better. But what are your thoughts about the different sizes, Joe?
I would agree with that. I think bigger flies better. I think you get a lot more wing area. They're a little bit more forgiving. But like we have the 1/6 scale size, and the 1/6 scale size is great for the guys that want to do a quick electric. I have gotten rid of all my nitro stuff. On my 1/6 scales, that's all electric. And anybody that's ever seen me fly the DR1 that we came out with 2 years ago, that thing flies great. And of course, I overpowered it, and it'll hover,
Right.
but it'll do torque rolls, inverted flight. It tracks really nice. It lands well. And people are often pretty amazed at how well it flies, because especially with the DR1s get I feel like they get a bad rap for the way they handle on the ground. But as long as you fly it like a triplane, they handle fine. And then, of course, the bigger the airplanes, the awe factor's there. So. But I enjoy flying every one of them. I fly the snot out of that DR1. So,
well, I've talked to Dave in the past at Balsa USA, at events and when I visited, and he talked about the fact that there's maybe minor changes to make them fly better. And he said to me, it's better to have a nice flying aircraft than have a 100% scale one balled up at the end of the runway. So for people that may not be aware of that, I mean, obviously you can add to the kit or change it, but can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, just minor tweaks to make them easier to fly and more forgivable.
Sure. So I get questions on this all the time, because actually now with Dave being retired, I take all of the tech emails and calls. So I get calls about this on a weekly basis. The Balsa USA airplanes are designed to fly well as models. If we built them fully scale, they wouldn't fly very good as models. They'd be a handful. Now there's people out there that they want that full on scale, and they understand that it's not going to be as easy to fly with those modifications. But of course, if that's what they want, then they go ahead and build it the way they want. But most of our models, or I should say all of our models, have had small little changes made to, like, the airfoil or the undercamber on the wing, or the incidents in the wing, or small little changes or fixes here and there to make them so that they fly better as models. And to me, that's the important thing. I want to make sure this hobby for me is all about making sure that, first of all, that I enjoy it. Because if I didn't enjoy what I was doing, I wouldn't be doing it. But I want to make sure that all of the people that come through Balsa USA have an experience where they can build a model and they can go out and fly it, and it's not going to be a handful for them to fly. They can fly it, they can take it out and lazy fly it, they can do whatever they want to with it, and they're not going to have issues keeping it in the air. So, but there's a lot of small stuff like that built into all of our kits, whether it be the way the ribs are shaped, or whether it be the way the incidence is, or the CG. Keep in mind, one of the things that people don't often think about, I get calls daily. Hey, is it normal to have to put 4 or 5 pounds of lead in the front of my airplane? Well, these World War I airplanes had giant radial engines in them, right? Weighed as much as 2 Volkswagens. So yeah, you build a Balsa USA World War I because of the fact that it's called zero nose moment. They don't have really any airplane in front of the CG. All of the weight of the airplane's in the tail. So yeah, when you build let's say a 3rd scale D7, you might have 8 pounds of lead just to get it to balance. But those are things that, as you do it, you get used to the way that it handles, and you can see why we make those changes. I've flown a couple airplanes where people that made the modifications to make them, more scale, and they just really didn't fly well as models because they were too scale, I think.
We've got a question here from Ted Brindle. It says, what is the recommended gas motor for the SE5A? I have the kit and hope to build it this winter.
Okay, so that airplane was designed around a G38. So anything in that ballpark is going to be perfect. You could probably go, my recommendation is, if you can get a hold of a G38, those things are like tanks, man. They're great engines. I've got a couple that I fly with. But you could do that as an electric. I would keep it to like around a 35 to a 45 cc equivalent. You could probably go, I'm guessing with the more modern engines like the DLE 35RA would probably fly that really nicely. I've not tried that yet, but I'm sure it probably would. And then you could, of course, go with electric conversions on it and do like I don't know, like a 120 with an 80 amp ESC running it on 6S. It'd probably work just fine. So that'd be where I would go. If I was building it, I actually have one in the garage and it's got a G38 in it. So that's the way I like to fly it.
He says he has a new unboxed G38.
Perfect. There you go. That's what that airplane was designed around. That is the engine that prototype had in it.
Perfect.
Yes,
so
sir.
I'm a big World War I fan. It's probably my favorite type of aircraft. I love biplanes. I mean, I know people can't see it, but I have biplanes. There's a Pitts biplane in the corner over here. There's a Stearman in the corner over here, and there is a Sopwith, a 1/6 scale Balsa USA Sopwith pup above me, and then there's a Balsa USA Eindecker behind me. I love World War I airplanes. I would go to the Dawn Patrol event every year. The Dawn Patrol Rendezvous. Just love World War I planes, and it's amazing to me how many different models that of World War I aircraft that Balsa USA brings to the market. I mean, pretty much almost anything you want to fly for the most part. And so when it comes time to bring on a new model, something that you don't have, so not a different size, but specifically a different model. I mean, what goes into that thought process, Joe, to figure out or pick a new World War I model to bring to the lineup?
Well, a lot of it's customers. We have customers always screaming. There's a couple that stick out on my mind because these are ones that they ask for all the time. One would be the 3rd scale SC5, and one would be the 1/4 scale Albatross. Those are the two that I get requested constantly, and those are airplanes that we're looking at. But we also, there's several out there that we just like the looks of. Basically we'll go through and I'll see a picture of an airplane and I'm like, hey, we should put that on the list because that's a cool airplane. And it's basically just what we like. That's what it boils down to. And we have there's a lot of plans in the archives that we haven't built. So there's a lot of that stuff that's already there. And we lose a big piece when Dave Lewis retires, because Dave Lewis had done probably 80% of the design work for Balsa USA for the last 50 years or so. And it's definitely going to leave a hole. But that's part of what I'm working on. Is I did a couple of design projects with SIG, so I've done this kind of work before, and that's one of the things that I'm working on getting up to speed on better. My thing is CAD, is learning CAD and getting proficient with it. You talked about Mark. Mark is excellent at CAD. He can do it way faster than anybody that I've ever seen, and so I'm building my chops. I'm doing a lot of small stuff, like the 1/6 scale electric conversion kit. That was my design, and the build caddies and some of that stuff. That was stuff that I'd put together. So we're getting there. So there will be new airplanes.
So Andy P., who lives here in Indiana, asks, would Balsa USA venture into ARC, almost ready to cover kits?
No, sir. That is just something that we are not going to do. We're not going to get away from our roots. Our roots are producing the best balsa kits on the market, and that's where we're going to stay. So we get that question a lot. We've had people ask about the ARCs. We've had people ask about the ARFs, and for us, that's just not something that we want to do.
Fair enough.
There are a lot of builders out there that will frame airplanes up for you, though. If you're interested in that, you've got a couple of the best builders in the whole world down by you, Andy, and you know who they
are. We've also got a question, and you might not know this yet, but Dogfight Apparel asks, what events will Joe and Balsa USA be at in 2021?
So we've decided to cut events out of our schedule. No, I'm just kidding. Honestly, I don't really know what the schedule is going to look like yet. I know I'm actually having the guys from the Golden Age Air Museum on tomorrow for Shop Time Live, And I know that's one of the events I want to try to get to. What I'm planning on doing for this year, because with this whole COVID thing that we had, I was able to do a lot of the smaller type dawn patrol events all across the whole Midwest. I did a whole bunch of them this year. Plus, I've still got to get in my competing for NASA. But we're gonna do Joe Nall. We are doing Perry. That is a go. As long as that event still goes in February, I think it's the 26th and 27th of February. We're gonna be at that. We're gonna, of course, do Joe Nall. We're always gonna do Brian Beck. We won't miss that one. And then after that, I'm just gonna fill in. I'm gonna try to do some of the Dawn Patrol. I'm gonna try to do some of the like the Warbird Alliance ones. My plan is to make it to one of the ones that they have at the Golden Air Age Museum. I like to go to different places. You know, it's nice to go to the same events all the time, but I'm trying to get out to different things that we haven't done. So those will be ones that we go to. We'll be at the, of course, my event at Cards is the Aces and Pioneers over the Ledges. We'll be at that one. So the schedule, I'm guessing I'll have a more solid idea like middle of January of what exact events that we'll be at, but there'll be several.
Well, Andy said, don't forget the Dawn Patrol here in Muncie. So hopefully you can make it out to that one.
I'll be there. That's one of the ones we go to every year.
You know, talking about events, I mentioned the one that takes place, the Blue Max down in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I went down there. Scott and a group of people puts that on, and it's a great event. And I went down there the first year they had it at Fantasy of Flight, and it was so windy that only 2 airplanes flew and 1 crashed. And that's it, just 2 the whole event. And I just got an email this week that event has been canceled. Well, at least maybe it's not canceled, maybe it's just postponed, but they're not having it when they normally have it at the very beginning of the year. So I know,
right,
you know, some events maybe still a little bit up in the air depending on what happens, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not going to be 100% surprised if we get notification from Perry, because Perry is supposed to be in February. And we'll wait and see. You know, like I said, if they have it and it's a go, we're already booked and we're already there. So we'll be at that one. But that one's the one that I'm a little concerned with, whether or not they're going to be allowed to run it or not. I actually, you know, you talk about Blue Max. I actually would like to see Blue Max. If you're listening, I would like to see them move it to more later in the season anyways. I think especially now, if they took that and moved it to say, oh, I don't know, maybe the weekend what Toledo was. The weather's a little bit better, and that weekend is open now. So if the organizers are here and they're listening, that would be a fantastic idea. And then the other one would be Top Gun. Top Gun, I think, would be another one that would be good if they had it later, weather-wise, if they had it a little bit later in the season. I know this year they had it late, and the weather was fantastic for those guys. It was really, really nice. So one of these days, I'm still hoping to get an invite to that so I can go and check it out. But the guys that I talked to that were there said the weather was as best as it's been in a long time.
You know, I think was it last year you wrote an article for us for our build issue about your build table, about making a build table, and having a great place.
Yes, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, and we got a lot of great feedback on that. And then earlier this year, you wrote an article for us on the common questions that you get, the tech support questions. So you talked a little bit about soldering landing gear and different techniques. And of course, you do videos too, where you show building airplanes and all that. And I think that's great, you know, imparting that knowledge, because it's important to pass that on as more people get into the hobby. I mean, obviously, we don't know how to build until we do it or someone shows us how to do it. So tell us a little bit about what that's been like for you, you know, to be able to share that knowledge, not just with people locally, but people worldwide.
So for me, it's twofold. Not only am I learning, but I'm able to impart that knowledge in a way that people can understand it. I try to keep things fairly simple. So, and how I do it is, and actually my build is I just finished the fuselage side for the quarter scale Cub build that I'm doing right now on the YouTube channel. If I see something that, hey, that, you know, I didn't know how to do that at one point, maybe I should do a video. And that's how I come up with the ideas. As I build an airplane, if I see something that I at one time had to ask about, or one time had messed it up and had to redo it, then I will make a video. And that's how I just try to keep that rolling as far as keeping the tips and the tricks and stuff that I do separately. I try to get those so that people that are building along with us can catch them before they get to a point and then mess something up and have to buy some new wood or that kind of stuff. That freaked me out when he did that. So there's a lot of that stuff. And like today, I was actually, before we started here, I was working on the video for joining pieces of stock together and making sure your joints are good. And I went over how to, you cut a little long and you sand to the dimensions so that way you get a good tight fit when you put your joints together. So those kind of things. The other day I did that one on the scarf joint splicing. That was another one that a lot of people don't understand how to do that. We've been getting a lot of questions on that because we have actually had some 48-inch restrictions put on us by the shipping companies. So we can no longer ship 48-inch wood. We have to ship 36-inch wood. So now, like in this cub build that I'm doing, part of doing it for the longerons, you have to make a scarf joint and splice those two pieces together to get a piece that's 49 inches. So that's how I come up with those ideas.
Do you get a lot of feedback, either people posting on YouTube or people reaching out to you? Do you get a lot of response and feedback on what you're doing with these videos?
Yeah. It's pretty constant. And, I say it all the time. We really appreciate everybody that takes the time to watch. And whether it's, again, I try to keep the tips and tricks pretty rudimentary for stuff so people that have never done this before can have a little bit of a helping hand. Because not everybody has, I have the ability, I can pick up the phone at any time and I can call Greg Hahn if I have a question, or I can call Tim Shurik, or I can call, all these builders, some of the greatest builders in the world. I have them in my cell phone, but not everybody has that. So I try to come up with tips and tricks so people that don't maybe understand how to do something will be able to be successful when they build. And we get a ton of feedback. The YouTube videos and the Facebook stuff is really pretty popular. The viewership just keeps going up. We just crossed 13,000 followers on the Facebook page a couple of days ago. So it's been growing by leaps and bounds over the last few years.
On the video right here, they're showing a manual. You're flipping through a manual, and the manuals have tons of information in them as well. I think that, not to say the manuals were bad previously, but I think, isn't that something over the past few years that's been a big focus of really providing a lot of content? I think it kind of started with the Balsa trainer that you did. I mean, basically the manual was so in depth that someone who never built an airplane themselves could build.
Right.
Has that been a focus, Joe, to provide even more helpful tips and pictures and information in the manuals?
Yes, and one of the things that I've personally been working on is a lot of our manuals assume a lot of knowledge. When these manuals were initially written, they assumed a lot of knowledge. Now, I will tell you, if you ever buy one of our kits, right in the front of the manual, and every manual we have, there's 10 pages of tips and tricks in every single manual that we have, right? But a lot of people skip to that. So they skip right past it. So there's a lot of assumed knowledge in these manuals, and it's not for the lack of them not doing a good job. It was just the fact that nowadays things are different. These manuals were a lot of them written 20, 30 years ago, and you didn't have the internet. You couldn't jump on and watch a video of some guy with a giant bald head showing you exactly what they're talking about in the video or in the manual. So that's been our focus, to try to fix that. And then on top of that, I started with the Cub. What I'm doing is I'm going through and retaking all the pictures and making digital high-res copies of the pictures. And we're going to do photo packs on the website for each manual. So the ones that I build and redo, you'll be able to go on, because as you'll notice in our manuals, those pictures have been copied and recopied and Xeroxed and copied and printed, and the image quality isn't there. So what I'm doing is I'm making full-on digital copies. So if you have a question about what's in picture 101, you can go on, pull up picture 101 and actually zoom into it so you can see the fine details of what it is you're supposed to be seeing.
That's
So
awesome.
that's all. Yeah, that's all the stuff that we're going to do. We had talked about doing, digital, full on digital manuals. I don't, for one, that's a huge amount of space to try to store online. And I just think the paper manuals, people like the paper manuals. So we're going to stick to the paper manuals, but you're going to be able to have like a sidecar that you can go in, you can pull up pictures. All these builds that I do are going to be build videos where you can follow along. If something in the manual didn't make sense, you can go and watch the video that coincides with the step that you're working on. And you've got the pause and the rewind and the zoom, and you can do all that stuff to make sure that it makes sense. I'm building it from my mind. And I like to kind of try to keep things pretty simple. So I hope that the videos and tips and stuffs are helping. And again, I think a lot of people have figured out that they can contact me just about any time. The tech at balsausa.com. They got my phone number. They can call me. They can get on and ask questions. And I try to get to them every day. So make use of that for sure.
That's a great resource. So, I kind of think of, I think, is it either Home Depot or Lowe's? They say, you can do it, we can help. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly, I just want to make sure people enjoy it. I had a guy call me the other day, and it was just like 2 days ago. Well, I need to know who your boss is so I can let him know, what a great job and all this stuff. And I'm like, my thing, and it's truly me, we've known each other for a while, and you guys know me.
Right.
And I just want to make sure you can enjoy it. And if you get a project, and I've been there, you buy a project, you start working on the project. If you get frustrated, then the project goes on the back wall and you never see it again. What we're trying to do is to make sure that you can be successful. So if you have a kit or you run into any issues that you can't understand or fix yourself, you can call me and we'll get through it. I tell people all the time, it's just wood. If you make a mistake, we make more wood. So you can cut it out and put new in. So, and that's, I try to incorporate that in my videos. If I mess something up, which I do, I've got a mess up that's going to be in the video for this one. I show you how to fix it. That's the thing. And that way people, it's the intimidation. And as well as I do that nowadays, especially with the world being what it is, you were talking about the Bighorn at the beginning of the show. You can buy basically a ready to fly airplane in Balsa now with the Bighorn and go out and be flying it in a couple hours. So a lot of this knowledge has gotten, I won't say forgot, but it's got generationalized, if that's a real word. I don't know if it is or not. But back when you guys got started, because I can't really use myself, I born myself to this during the height of ARFs. But the folks that started out doing this way back when I should have, that's all you had. You either built it or you didn't have. So now that knowledge has gotten, it's not forgotten, because I'm telling you, the building community is growing. I know everybody's always saying, "Oh, building's dead." It's not. I'm here to tell you, it's not. My shipping department will tell you it is not dying.
Yeah, it's not.
We get kids going with this stuff all the time, and just make sure that they get it is all I'm trying to do and enjoy it.
I've shared this story once before, but the first airplane I ever built was a Carl Goldberg Eagle II, and we went to the movies and we came home and our dog had used the fuselage as a chew toy. So I had to build a second one. But the good news is the second one was better than the first one, because any mistakes, anything that I, had question with, I did better. And I've been involved in model aviation since about 1976, I think. To your point, I always point out to people, there's nothing wrong with a ready to fly or an ARF or a receiver ready, because there's some people that don't have the time, or maybe they feel they don't yet have the skill. I think anything that brings people into our hobby is great. So maybe they start out with those, those projects that are pretty much ready to fly. And then after they've picked up their flying skills, then a lot of times then people say, hey, I want to build something. Or I hear these great stories where clubs go in and the whole club builds the same model and they help each other. And when they're done, they got like 16 or 18 or 20 or whatever the number is of the same model. So, I wouldn't discourage anyone, no matter what you fly, no matter how easy it is to get it to fly, it's all good, because in the end, it's about our own personal enjoyment of the hobby and whatever it takes to get us there. So, and I'm sure you agree with that, Joe.
Oh,
And
absolutely. I say all the time that I have people that get grumpy about foam, and to me, what foam is, and it's always going to be, is a gateway drug. Foam is a gateway drug, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" Well, it's because these young kids, they don't have the money to go out and spend a couple $100 on an airplane. They're going to go over to the hobby shop. They're going to see the UMX Timber or whatever is the hottest thing at that moment, or the Bighorn by OMP, and they're going to say, "Oh, you know what? That's a price I can afford, and I can go and fly that tomorrow." So they're going to get that, and then they're going to get the hooks in them. And as they progress, you guys all know we're all self-proclaimed plane nerds. I don't even want to tell you how many airplanes I have, but that's how they get started. And if that's what they need to get started, then let them do it. My personal opinion on this: the best way to learn how to fly is on a glow trainer, high wing trainer. That's the best way anybody could learn how to fly, because you learn all aspects of it. But then after that, who cares? They can fly whatever they want. I mean, I've got everything from 140-mile-an-hour fast movers to Cubs. I mean,
right.
jets and EDFs and props and electric. It doesn't matter. Enjoying the hobby is what matters, and we've all got to stick together in that.
Absolutely.
Over the last few years, that's gotten to be, you being at the AMA full time can attest to, there's a lot of division in our hobby. You've got the helicopter guys, you got the airplane guys, you got the it's even as small as World War I, World War II. You've got all these different aspects of the hobby, but we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to go out and we're all trying to enjoy ourselves. And what we need to do is we need to support each other, regardless of whether you're flying a third scale Stearman or if you're flying a peanut sized little UMX indoor flyer. It doesn't matter. We're all after the same thing, which is being able to enjoy this hobby.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. Well, we're out of time. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up?
I just want to really thank you guys for having me on. I want to appreciate everybody into the sidebar there in the comments. I appreciate you guys being here for us and helping support what we do. And stay tuned. There's a lot of stuff coming.
Well, I definitely appreciate you taking the time with us and also being flexible after we had to reschedule. I appreciate Balsa USA. They've been a great supporter of AMA and the hobby. And as I said, you yourself, Joe, coming and helping us with our events. And we really appreciate that. A couple of a few last minute things that I want to share with everyone is, so obviously since we postponed this show, the next show will only be 2 weeks from now. And that show is going to have Greg Gimlick on, who was in the chat today. He was also the guest on the first show. You probably know by now he's retiring as our electric columnist after 27 years. So his column in the December issue, which is out now, was the last column. And so we're going to have him on. And then the person that's replacing Greg is Terry Dunn. And a lot of people probably know Terry Dunn because he's done reviews and articles for us. And he's also part of the RC Roundtable. So Terry is taking over as the electric columnist. So we're going to bring both of them on in 2 weeks to talk a bit about the electric column and just kind of do a thank you to Greg and kind of a handoff to Terry. And then I can also tell you our next show, which will be January 15th. I just got off the phone with him today. Dave Scott, the owner of the first U.S. RC flight school, whom I attended his flight school about 11 or 12 years ago, and I did an article about it, and I learned a lot. And he's written several articles for the magazine. And every time we run his article, we get tons of feedback, how to land and how to fly the pattern and, fly ahead of the aircraft instead of behind the aircraft. And I mean, he's just written so many articles for us that have really resonated with our readers that I'm really excited. We're going to have him on the show for the January 15th episode, and he's going to talk to us all about his flight school. He's also a full-scale competitor, and we'll be sure to answer any questions or tips or tricks. And I also want to point out that I just got this week the new Spectrum NX6, and by next week-ish, I'll have the NX10, and I will do a video comparing the two. So the NX6 being the entry level of the new NX series, and the NX10 being the top of the line currently. And I'll kind of compare and contrast in a video the difference in the radios, and then I'll also we'll be publishing a review. So thanks everyone who was able to join us, whether it be live today or later. And again, thank you, Joe, for being here with us. It's always a pleasure, and look forward to seeing everybody again in 2 weeks.
Thanks for having me, Jay.
All right, take care.